Welcome to Everlutionary, a podcast about how we can restore balance and heal the world. Every episode of my show, we explore the future of humanity and how we've gotten to where we are today. Through inspirational stories about healing, science, and mysticism, we'll see how we can reshape our society to create a world free of violence. I'm your host, Hawah Kasat. Greetings, friends from all around the world. Thank you for tuning back in to another episode of Everlutionary. I've got a really special episode planned for all of you today. Our guest, she has spent over 10 years of her life working in one of the largest jails and correctional facilities in the world. And it is a harrowing statistic, but the United Nations estimates that we have over 11.5 million people around the world who are locked behind bars in prisons and correctional facilities. Now, to be someone who is working day in and day out in some of the most isolated, marginalized, and perhaps intense environments on our planet is really not something to take for granted. Oneika Mays, our guest today, she describes resilience as not just the ability to bounce back, but also the capacity to adapt in the face of challenging circumstances. And her life as the very first mindfulness teacher at one of the world's largest correctional facilities is a testament to the human spirit and what is possible when we believe in the redemption and the humanity of the people in our world. And so her career is an example for all of us to see how yoga and meditation can transform people's lives, both personally and professionally. And Oneika offers a blend of compassion and skill that's really rare. Her work is a commitment that extends far beyond the walls of just Rikers Island. Right now, we're really excited to say that she just landed a book deal with Harper One, and her upcoming memoir is called You Can Sit With Me, and it is slated to release in April of 2026. And her book, it promises to be a deep dive into the themes of unconditional love, trust, and the universal quest for connection and understanding. So in our podcast episode today, we're going to learn a lot about her life as someone who has been working in Rikers Island and how she's been able to manage her own healing, but also providing safe, brave spaces for the people she works with. And then we're also going to talk about her journey as an author and how she landed this incredible book deal. And for anybody who's listening today, if you're working on a project, if you've been trying to manifest something in your life, you're going to hear a few of the things that you can do to help make sure you can stick to the script and get something from start to finish. And that will be one of the joys of this podcast episode as well. We'll be talking about rejection and what to do when we are rejected and how to keep pushing forwards and turn your dream into a reality. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this incredible conversation with Oneika Mays.
I am so happy to be with you.
I'm so happy you said yes. I mean, there's so much to get into here, and I want to start with your work here on Rikers Island. You've been trailblazing this mindfulness program, that you were the first mindfulness teacher on Rikers Island. And for our listeners, just to start, we'd love to ground everyone in what Rikers Island is, where Rikers Island is located, since it's something you may have heard of, but you might not know. So could you give us a little bit of foundational knowledge on Rikers Island?
Yeah, so Rikers Island is a jail, and it is actually on an island in New York City. I think it was founded in 1932 when it actually became a jail. So it's a jail, which is different than a prison. So a jail is where people are housed supposedly temporarily, where they wait to await their fate before they go on trial, or they're serving a year or less for a sentence. So that's where people go. And I worked there for 4 years full time. And before that, I was a volunteer there for 6 years. And I worked there with a nonprofit. So I spent a total of a decade. And Rikers Island is really huge. You can't imagine. It's huge. I want to say there are about 4,500 people who are probably housed there right now. I think that number's right. It could be a little bit less than that. That might have been the most recent census. There are probably about 7,000 people who work there in terms of officers. So it's its own city in terms of who's housed there. There are about 11 jails. I want to say about 7 of them are probably functioning. There's one women's jail that's on the island. And it's really quite incredible how big the island is.
Yeah. And it's over 400 acres, from my understanding, but it wasn't always that big. You referred to it as really large, and that's huge. A 400-acre correctional facility and jail is huge, but it only originally started as 100 acres in size. So the way that it grew to over 400 acres, in my understanding, is that it was a landfill and a dump for trash from New York City that was brought there, and the prisoners on Rikers Island were basically placing all the trash around the island and built up all of the land around the island and increased it by over 300 acres in size, which is mind-boggling.
And there's methane problems to this day because of it.
Yes. And so when you would travel to Rikers Island every day for your work. And can you tell us a little bit about what and how you traveled there? How did you get there? What was your daily commute every day into what is one of the United States' largest correctional facilities?
So I would take 2 subways and then 2 buses to get to Rikers Island. And then you have to take a bus actually across the bridge. So it was an adventure when I was a volunteer to go there. So when I was going there as a volunteer, I was going there once or maybe twice a week. So when you went as a volunteer, you would really block out either a day or even a half a day just to go to teach like an hour or 2 hours. But you would have to really arrange your entire day just to do that for an hour or 2.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was quite a big deal.
And you said you were full-time there for 4 years.
Yeah. Almost 5.
It looks like there's almost over 7,000 or more employees that work there. It's that big. And there's incredible documentaries that have been done about it. And in the show notes for this podcast episode, for those who want to learn more, we're going to place some links and resources about the history and about some of the ongoing problems at Rikers Island. But Oneika, you came there as a coach, as a mindfulness teacher. The journey to this is one that I think we all need to learn more about, because you're working at this point on Rikers Island with some of the most marginalized, isolated people in the world. And so if you could tell us a little bit about how did you end up at Rikers Island and how did you end up as the first mindfulness teacher there?
Well, I had started because I was volunteering, teaching yoga and mindfulness, trauma informed yoga and mindfulness as a yoga and mindfulness teacher. And then I was asked to interview to be a part of a wellness program. So I didn't work for the Department of Corrections. I actually worked for New York Health and Hospitals, which is one of the agencies that helps serve the folks who are being housed at Rikers. And the agency that I work for is called Correctional Health Services. So they provide medical care for the folks who are housed at Rikers Island. And we were put in charge of launching a wellness program at the Rose M. Singer Center, which is the women's facility at Rikers Island. So the Rose M. Singer Center housed women, non-binary folks, trans folks, and trans men, and also men who didn't feel safe being housed at men's facilities at Rikers. So I was really fortunate to work this at the wellness program with an acupuncturist, a wellness coach, and myself. So we were tasked to do something that nobody else had done before, to bring holistic services to a population to help them, whether it was with insomnia, basic somatic issues, and stress. And the doctors that we worked with were absolutely incredible. Most of them were really deeply rooted in abolition, and they really let us do whatever we wanted to do. So I had my own office. We each had our own offices, and we worked in a really small specialty clinic. So it was really like having my own practice. So folks would get to see me on a one-on-one basis. And I had an opportunity to sit down with them and really do like an intake.
And just create more context for people, you said you started by volunteering. And then from volunteering, you came into this position where you became a full-time employee doing this work. But there's a lot of people in this world that are teachers, they're yoga teachers, breath work teachers. There's all kinds of coaches and life coaches out here, but there's a very few amount of them that decide or that just kind of wake up one morning and say, I'm going to go to one of the world's largest correctional facilities, one of the most potentially abusive, violent, oppressive environments on the planet for anyone to be living and breathing in. And I'm going to go spend every day there. And well, before you became a full-time employee there as a volunteer, I'm going to go just spend my off time to go volunteer in this space and then to choose that. How did you get to that point where you chose to take your teaching to the prison, to the jail?
People ask me this all the time. I don't really have a sexy story about that. I used to be really sad. I used to really struggle. I used to feel very trapped inside my own body. And when I discovered loving kindness, when I discovered unconditional friendliness for myself, I just wanted to share that practice with people. And I come from a family of folks who grew up in social justice. And it just kind of made sense to go there and teach it. And it's really just that simple. And I went to the Google and typed in yoga in jail. It was really that simple. And I found this nonprofit and started doing it. And I wish I had a better story. And part of me feels like maybe I should make up something, but that's what I did. And when I went there, and I went there for the first time, I used to be very selfish. And I used to think that the world kind of revolved around me until I found my practice. Like everything was about me. I had a whole nother career before I found yoga. And I was going to actually change. Well, I wasn't very selfish, but that's not true. I was very selfish. And I had a whole nother career before I found yoga. But then when I found yoga and I found mindfulness and I found this idea of loving kindness and unconditional friendliness, I didn't know what a calling was. But when I walked into Rikers for the first time, I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be here. And it was like, oh, I get it. This is what a calling is. This is what people are talking about. And I kind of just knew I wouldn't leave for a while. And my life just unfolded from there. And I was volunteering, so I knew I couldn't make a living. So I created my whole life around funding volunteering. So I became a massage therapist because teaching yoga was not paying the bills. So I had to become a massage therapist. I did all of these trainings so I could have this wealth of knowledge, how to really understand how we take care of ourselves. So I could really make sure I was taking care of folks inside and myself at the same time. And I found all of this joy. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really amazing. And it all like one step followed the other. And I found myself just getting happier and happier and happier and happier. It felt really divinely inspired. And it was truly divinely inspired because I did not grow up with any sort of spirituality whatsoever. So there was truly something guiding me because my mother was an atheist and my father was a scientist. So I didn't have any faith. I didn't grow up with faith in my background. So I was really like kind of being led. And then when the opportunity came to like kind of do this full time, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And it was really challenging. And ultimately, I found too challenging because I did ultimately leave because of kind of I realized maybe wasn't the thing that I maybe should be doing full time, which is a whole nother story.
I got to say, first of all, that I think what's happening right now in terms of how we deal with incarceration, how we deal with crime, what has transpired in terms of the prison industrial complex, and how prisons are often a source of free sweatshop labor for corporations. There's little opportunity for redemption and healing and really transformation within anyone that's placed behind bars. Our prisons are not, although maybe they're supposed to be places of rehabilitation, they seem sometimes to do the opposite, and they create more violence and more pain and trauma for those that are incarcerated. What did you see in terms of your work as a healer, your work as a teacher and an educator? What did you see in terms of the human spirit, like the people you were working with day in and day out, those that were behind bars? How did you find a thread to understand what they were going through, and how did you meet them where they were in their own journey of healing?
I think the illusion of prison or jail, whatever we're talking about, is to think that, to make us think who aren't there, that we're safe. We have jails and prisons to make people who aren't there to think that we're safe. And it's just an illusion. They don't keep us safe. We keep us safe. And working with people who are incarcerated, working with officers, and there was a difference between volunteering and working there full time. And I think that's important to note. When I worked there as a volunteer, I had a different attitude. I think when I was a volunteer, I had a very reductive attitude about the system. I think I was very self-righteous. Like, everybody who was an officer and who was staff were all jerks, and they were all sort of keeping everybody down. And everybody who was incarcerated was wrongfully detained. And I was the good person, and my yoga mat was like my sword of justice. Like, it was so obnoxious. Like, it really was. And I freely admit this, and it's so cringy to admit. Like, and here I was going to be doing the good thing, me going in and doing my yoga, and wasn't this so good of me? But I think it's important to admit that, because I think often with practices like yoga, some of us get into these things because we think we're going to bring our yoga in doing the right thing, because we think these practices are liberatory, and they are. But only if we are liberating ourselves first, only if we're dealing with our own stuff. And I don't think when I first started, I had dealt with my own stuff. Over time, I had dealt with my own stuff. And then when I realized I am indeed the drama and I am the problem, and when I had dealt with my own stuff and realized that we're in this together, and it's not for me to free anybody, but people need to free themselves, that's when things shifted. People free themselves. People are their own safe spaces. There are no safe spaces in the world, but people find the safe spaces inside themselves. And as a teacher, it's just my job to provide the space for them to do that. And when I figured that out, that's when the game changed. And when I did that, that's when I was ready to be a mindfulness coach full time. And that's when I could do that job really well. And that's when I could step into that role and understand that nobody at Rikers is okay. Everybody is suffering. Officers, staff, people incarcerated, me, everybody's in pain there, because the system hurts everyone. Everybody is hurting. Everybody. It's just degrees. And everybody needs healing. And we've got to dismantle the whole thing. There's got to be a better way to do all of it. It can't be a reform. We've got to do a better way. And I don't know what that looks like. And I think both things can happen. I'm not just saying like, tear it all down and we don't have anything, right? Because I think that's ridiculous. I do think we can figure something else out because I do think folks need healing. And so things that I did see happen, I would see people have these moments where they would just exhale for the first time and say like, I've never done that before. I've never taken a breath like that before in my life. And that wasn't me. And I'm not trying to be humble. This isn't being humble. But when you provide space for somebody just for them to take a breath for the first time, I mean, you've seen that being a teacher, somebody just saying like, we need to be doing that all around the world.
We've got to reorganize how the whole system operates. But what's really powerful for me is just knowing that everybody there is hurting and suffering. And I was definitely doing a good amount of reading on Rikers Island before we sat down to talk today. And I was learning a lot about how so many of the prison guards there and the staff there are dealing with their own mental health and the amount of abuse that often those that are behind bars are dealing with, whether that's from fellow inmates or even from the sort of pain and anger and the resentment that the security guards have and the prison guards have that they take out on the prisoners. So there seems to be a lot of compression. Like it's a really, really compressed, densely compressed space where everybody needs healing, like you said. And the tactics you were utilizing to give people an opportunity to breathe, to get in touch with their own center, did you move the needle? Did you see something shift within the people you were working with and connecting with?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I hope. I think the number one, what I practiced was non-attachment, was the number one thing I practiced. I let go of outcomes when I was there because it wasn't about what I hoped for people. Because I think if I held on to what I hoped for people, I might break my heart every day, not just for me, but for everybody. I mean, there were times that I would hold on for hope for somebody and they walked out and overdosed and died. So I couldn't hold on for hope. But I don't think it was about that. Again, I think it was about understanding that people can create their own safe space. And I learned there are no safe spaces. And I think that's important to note.
What do you mean by that when you say there are no safe spaces?
I don't think there are any safe spaces.
In the world or in Rikers Island?
In the world. I don't think there are any safe spaces. And I think Rikers taught me that. Because often, and I'm a trauma-informed teacher, and you hear a lot of trauma-informed teachers talk about, I create a safe space and I make sure that this space is safe. But you can't. You can't. We don't know what people are dealing with. There's no way. But the one space that people can learn to create for themselves is that they are the safe space. We can teach people how to regulate for themselves. People can learn how to co-regulate. That's what we teach as teachers. We learn that we can be our own safe space. I learned that's what Rikers taught me, being in a space like that. And that's what I learned. That's what I taught. And a space like Rikers will teach you that very quickly. And I let go of, not of hope. I think Rikers also taught me hope, that I held on to a lot of hope. Things that I saw that I could give hope and hold on to hope, but I let go of outcomes because they weren't important. They just weren't. They weren't important. I think I mentioned earlier before we went live that I got a text message from somebody. Sometimes people do send me messages and they're doing well. And sometimes I never hear from anybody again. I don't think it's about that. I think the hope ripples out and maybe it touches somebody. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't.
Right. There's this work, the youth work that I've been doing for decades. Often we'd be bringing young people into nature, some of them from Washington, D.C., their first time ever out of the city, walking through the woods, sleeping in the woods. It was extremely disarming for some of these kids that are considered themselves to be tough and sort of like strong in their own ways. And we would go canoeing, for example, and take all these kids on a kayak trip. And there was no safe way for some of these young people to get on a canoe. It was really about creating a brave space for them to know that this is going to be a little challenging. It's possible that something will happen. You have a life jacket on. Hopefully the canoe doesn't tip over and we don't end up in the river. But if we do end up in the river, I can't guarantee you that as your teacher, as your facilitator. I can do all the things I can. I can put the life jacket on you. I can give you the oar. I can spend an hour with you on the shore, teaching you how to oar, how to distribute your weight to make sure you don't fall into the water. But ultimately, I can't say to you, this is a safe space. That's just me being really not true to their own personal anxiety, whatever fear of the water they might have, fear of fish or, whatever could be in the water that they're worried might eat them or hurt them. So for me, it was an opportunity to lean into how do we encourage people to be brave in spaces and not create a false expectation. And I love how you're being clear that to let go of that attachment to trying to create change was one of the deepest lessons that you learned while on Rikers Island, because it feels to me perhaps really heartbreaking as well. I can only imagine how many times you felt so much grief from learning about the stories, working with the people you were working with, seeing how isolated, distraught, perhaps, and emotionally just distressed they were for having to be on this journey.
And liberating. There are times that somebody would come to my office for the first time and they would tell me about themselves and we would explore like a basic meditation and they would try it and someone would say, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. And I would say, okay, great. And they would look at me and say, what? You know now that you don't like this. That's agency. You just made a choice for yourself. That's hooray. We know something you don't like. So let's try something else. Because when you make choices, you are finding ways that you can free yourself. When choice is freedom, when we can make choices, we are making changes and agency for ourselves, or way that we can be free. And when you are incarcerated, every choice that you can make for yourself is really powerful in a place where you are told what to eat, what to wear, when to go to the bathroom, all of these things. So when you can claim something, that's a really big deal. So people would look at me like, oh, I didn't realize that. And claiming that, that's a big deal. And really holding on to that and say, oh, okay, I didn't know that saying no was going to make you so happy or me so happy. And finding things that people like, okay, well, I don't like this. Well, maybe I like this. And then over time, finding these things that, well, now I know all these things I don't like. Maybe I like these things. And it became this really wonderful exploration of, I like all of these things and I don't like these things, but maybe sometimes I like to do this or I like to do that. And it became play. And it could be a lot of fun to explore. So those were ways too that people could find ways to be liberated and to take those things with them. These weren't just things that happened inside just at Rikers. These were tools to take with you forever.
Yeah, and tools that might have really supported them and support all of us if we had an opportunity to learn these techniques and practices when we were way younger. Tools that maybe we would have benefited from if we learned when we were in elementary school or in middle school or in high school. Tools around how to deal with my anger when the anger is arising, tools to learn how to bring down my anxiety and how to take a step back and pause before acting or doing something. Like these are the little social emotional learning skills that would probably do all of us a lot of good. I think that one thing that really resonates in this moment as you were talking, there's a quote that I love by Du Bois, and he wrote one time, approximately, he said and wrote, as long as there is a lower class, I am in it. As long as there is a criminal element, I am of it. And as long as there is a soul in prison, I am not free. And I wonder often how we deal with sort of like when there are those who don't fit in to our society, our culture, into the community. The response in the modern world is to extract them, take them, and remove them from the community. And that's how we deal with those who transgress the societal commitments that we make. Those who break laws potentially are considered outcasts. They're then marginalized. They're thrown away. They're placed onto islands, such as Rikers Island, where people don't have to any longer see or interact or engage. And it's kind of like what we do with our trash. And I think it's really interesting because Rikers Island, as we said at the very beginning, it became a landfill. It was a dump for all of New York City's trash for years and years, which is kind of like we try to move things out of sight so we don't have to deal with them. We try to remove them from our vision. And I'm wondering, you basically chose to wake up every day and go to see those who society has decided we don't want to see, we don't want to interact with. Let's put you all the way behind these walls and behind these bars so that you can be as far away from us as possible. And I'm using us very broadly. I'm using broad brushstrokes here to just kind of explain what we do. We throw away things. We throw away people. We throw away trash. We try not to see it again. But part of the transformation and the healing here is, and part of your own reclamation of your own life is deciding, like, I actually want to know what this is about. I'm going to go and be here. What's a way that you have continued to use your life experience here at Rikers Island now to push your work forwards? How are you continuing to engage in this work of healing?
I don't forget. Once you've been there, you can't forget. And I think if I could, I would take everybody with me to Rikers. I would take every single person that I know on a field trip with me, and I can. So I am writing a book about it.
Okay. And tell us about that. You started writing a book about your experience while working on Rikers Island. What's the name of the book? And tell us a little bit about how you plan on telling the story.
It's called You Can Sit With Me. And it's about working at Rikers Island. And it's about metta meditation. And metta is a Buddhist practice. And metta is the Pali word for loving kindness, which really just means love, which really just means unconditional friendliness or kindness. And I think it's because I don't want to forget. I don't want to ever forget what it was like to work at Rikers. And not as some badge of honor, not as some trauma porn, but just as a way to remember, because we shouldn't ever forget people. We should never forget those who are there. I know a lot of people who were there who are no longer there, but there are still people there. There are people in jails all across the world who should be remembered. People are forgetting about every moment of every day. And I think it's important that somebody remember them and somebody talk about them. It's making me emotional to even talk about because it's just so easy Because it's not even so much about, I think, the crimes people think that they've committed. Because I don't think this is even about policing and about crime. I haven't even mentioned crime because I don't think this has anything to do with crime or policing. Because if we're going to get into that, we could get into the over policing that happened in the neighborhoods to get people there. Because the majority of the people in these jails are Black and brown. So I don't want to even get into that. What I do want to talk about is the fact that people get forgotten about and they shouldn't be. And I want to remember them. And the way that we remember people is to remember that we are all connected. And the way that I remember that is through the practice of metta. And through that practice, I do remember that we are all connected. And when we remember that we're all connected, it's hard to be unkind. It's hard to be unkind to somebody who you see as family. It's hard to be unkind when somebody isn't a stranger. And that's what I want to remember. That's what I want people to remember. So that's what I'm writing about. And I'm writing that through stories.
You have this incredible vision that is, in my opinion, fueled by being able to see the humanity in people. And I can't imagine anyone that's working in a jail or a prison the way you have to do justice to the healing and the redemption of all people everywhere. It does require us to see their humanity and to see their humanness and to love somebody even in the midst of all that pain and suffering. And so your book, is it telling the stories of the people you met, or is it teaching us how to once again love unconditionally and love strangers?
It's both. So I'm telling stories of what I learned working at Rikers through people who I met, both people who I worked with, both people who are incarcerated, and both people who I worked with at Rikers. And also through the practice and teaching what I learned through the practice of metta. So it's been quite a journey writing the book. And it's also been a way to process the 10 years of being on the island. I didn't realize how much was still in my heart working on the island. And it also weaves in a lot of how I got to where I was to even be on the island. So there's a little bit of that woven in there as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you and I, we had a chance to connect many weeks ago after a long time, and we're both on a similar trajectory right now. We're both in the process of writing books. And I would love for you to share, if you don't mind, a little bit about the journey to even finally be where you are. So you now have a book deal. You've signed with Harper One, and your book is scheduled to release in the spring of 2026, which is so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Many of us dream of writing books. And for those listening, this is a crazy statistic that I learned from one of my professors. He said that out of all the people that desire to write a book, all the people in the world that want to write books, there is less than 1% of those people actually write the book, take it all the way from start to finish and finish the manuscript and publish it. Less than 1%. And you're in the midst of a journey that is climbing up a mountain, and it doesn't happen overnight. And I want to demystify some of the process. So could you help us demystify the process of how did you land a book deal? Let us know. How did you land a book deal? What did you do to get there?
It wasn't overnight and it was really hard. So it's September 2024. I started this process in 2020.
It's taken you 4 years to land a book deal.
Yes. I thought about writing a book years before that, but I put pen to paper of thinking about writing this book in 2020. And I wrote a proposal and I wrote 4 proposals. And I wrote a very solid proposal that I got support on with a really great book coach. And I got an 8 and I had to write a book. I had to write a proposal that was 20 pages and it was amazing. And a sample chapter to get an agent because you have to do that. And once I got an agent and landed an agent, we shopped it around and I got 16 rejections, 16 really beautiful rejections. They were really lovely.
16 rejection letters. This is just your first draft. This is your first proposal that you had sent out.
No, that was my third proposal that I got the rejections. I had other proposals with that didn't even get anything.
How many times did you rewrite your book proposal?
3.
3. Okay. And were they totally different proposals?
They were variations on the same
idea and the concept, writing about your time.
Yeah.
At Rikers Island.
At Rikers.
Yeah. So rejection and being rejected that many times and still going back and being, I'm going to try again. How did you deal with the rejection? How did you gain the momentum to keep at it for so long?
I think rejection is part of the process. Rejection and doubt, I think, are also just a part of faith and trust. I think they renew your faith and trust. You have to have, that rejection says you get a little doubt, but then you step into faith and trust to keep going. Rejection happens. It's very rare that you would just write a proposal, land an agent, and get a book deal. Like that never happens. Well, maybe it happens for some people, but it rarely ever happens. And you have to keep going. And you really have to be rooted and grounded and a lot of perseverance. Perseverance is so key because rejection it's just a part of it. It really is just a part of it. And I think you have to get comfortable with it. I don't think you have to get so comfortable with it that you need to sort of wear it like a coat, like it doesn't need to be.
I mean, look, I'm in the midst of the rejection process. I've been really fortunate to recently have signed with a literary agent. And
congratulations.
Thank you.
You should celebrate every step.
Yes. And I need to do more of that. I've never historically been good at celebrating something that is pivotal or kind of like a milestone. I just kind of move on to the next project. And so I appreciate you saying that. That's true. I need to do more and better. I need to do better at celebrating every step. But the book proposal that we had finally began to send out at the beginning of this year, well, not the beginning of this year, I think it was like April or May, it has now been rejected like over 25 times by editors at major publishing houses all over. And it's deflating. I'm not going to lie. Rejection after rejection. And now we're back on the drawing board and I've rewritten the book proposal and tweaked it and re-engineered it. And there's still this feeling of, like, to me, the work, it's like giving birth to something. And part of that process is knowing that I'm going to have to be resilient. I loved how you called in perseverance. I think that's probably one of the defining qualities of the difference between starting a book and then just giving up a couple years later and then having the perseverance to take it all the way to the end and actually finish it. And so I have a lot of empathy for where you are and a lot of joy. I have a joy to know that you're in the throes of book writing. Do you have any advice for anyone that might be listening, that's working on a project that might be a book or a music album, maybe a company or a business? Any advice in addition to the perseverance, but anything else that you found in your own journey that has helped you continue to manifest and to create into reality what you're dreaming?
Yeah. Stay in the boat. And that's not my advice. I got that from Jamie Attenberg. She is a writing coach and she does a challenge every year of 1,000 words. And she does these 1,000 word challenges in June. And she does 1,000 words every day for 2 weeks. And she talks about staying in the boat. She does it for her writing challenges, but I think it's advice for life, to be honest with you. She had no idea how much this influenced me. I actually messaged her about it on Instagram and she reposted it, which I thought was hilarious. I was like, yo, Jamie, you've changed my life. Because she talks about this idea with writing about staying in the boat. She's like, you're going to want to jump out. You're going to want to like grab a bottle of booze and drink in the boat. And you're going to want to sort of get a life jacket and do all these things, but stay on the boat. But I think that's advice for life. We're always going to want to get out and take a shortcut and do all of these things. But you just have to stay in the boat. Even if you sleep in the boat, even if you aren't doing anything in the boat, even if you have pizza delivered to yourself in the boat, stay in the boat. Even if you're on your phone in the boat, on Instagram in the boat, stay in the boat. Just stay in the boat until the next thing happens with your project. Just don't get out of the boat because it will happen. Because if you get out, you can't be in the boat when the thing happens and get to the other side. You got to be there.
And if you get out, you've momentarily abandoned your dream. You're abandoning your vision. You're getting out of the boat. You're basically like, oh, I don't want to travel to the other side of this ocean right now. I'm going to get out of the boat and I'm going to go check out this tree and go look at this tree for a little while. And then you wonder why you never got across the ocean. It's because you didn't stay in the boat.
When I read that, it was really just such a light bulb moment for me, not just for my writing, but really for my life. When things feel tough for me, I actually just tell myself, just stay in the boat.
I love that. Just stay in the boat. There's this story I love there's a village, and this is a story about kind of like staying in the boat. But in this village, people were searching for water and wanting to dig a water well. And so the young villagers, they would dig 20 feet in one spot and they didn't find any water. And so they'd stop digging and they'd go 500 feet in another direction and they'd dig another 20 or 30 feet. They didn't find any water. So they're like, oh, there's no water here either. So then they walked 1,000 feet in another direction and they dug 40 feet in this hole, another hole, but no water. And finally, this older elder from the village, a neighboring village, comes by and he sees 5 or 6 holes in the ground that are just partially dug. And he says, what are y'all doing? And they said, well, we've been trying to find water. And so we're digging for water, but we don't think there's any water around here. So the elder says, well, you're just needing to stay in one place and you just need to dig deeper and you'll hit water. And so he says, go back to the first hole and I want you to just dig down 120 feet. And so all the young villagers go back and they start digging back into that hole and they keep digging and digging and digging and they get to 50 feet and 80 feet and then they hit 100 feet. And then right around that time when they get to like 110 feet, they hit water. And this is kind of staying in the boat to me. It's like we start digging these holes and then we abandon the hole and we start digging another hole somewhere else. And then we abandon that hole and we start digging another hole somewhere else. And 5 years of our lives go by and we wonder why we never hit water. We wonder, but the water was under our feet the whole time. We just never stayed in one place long enough. We jumped to the next thing or we didn't dig deep enough and we never hit the water. And so stay in the boat, wear your life jacket.
Exactly.
And don't get distracted.
Yeah.
Love that. I love how that all comes full circle. Wow. Oneika, you're an inspiration and you know that. I would love to hear more about any final things that you have for our listeners, anything that is moving you, anything you'd like to share that we haven't gotten to yet during our conversation here today.
You know what's really moving me these days? This is really random. The show Res Dogs. Do you know Res Dogs on Hulu? This is sort of just out of left field.
There was a movie called Reservoir Dogs, right? Wasn't there a movie?
No, it's Res Dogs. It's a TV show on Hulu. It's about these kids who live on a reservation. It's a comedy. It's amazing. It's funny and it's tender and it's full of joy and it's really moving me. As I'm writing, I like to watch things that are sort of not what I'm sort of writing about that sort of really fill my heart with joy. So that's really been moving me lately. So that's filling my heart with a lot of joy.
I love that.
Yeah, it's Res Dogs. So you have to check that out.
RES.
REZDOGS.
Okay. Res Dogs. We like leads. I love a good lead from a friend. And you mentioned earlier, way earlier in our conversation, you mentioned something called metta and metta meditation. You're a mindfulness coach. You're a healer. You're a meditation teacher.
I don't call myself a healer, but that's okay.
Oh, tell me why. I love that. Why do you not call yourself a healer?
I don't know. I don't like the word.
Say more. What is it about the word?
I don't think of myself as a healer. I always feel funny when people refer to me as that. I don't know.
What comes up for you, though, when you say you don't see yourself as a healer? What do you see a healer doing? Or is it some stigma around the word?
No, it's not stigma around it. I see other people doing that. For folks who are visibly like shake, like, no.
You got a little chill, like shivers go through your whole body.
I'm like, no.
I'm not a healer. I resist being a healer. You're rebelling. So what does a healer do, in your opinion?
I don't know. I feel like I save that for other folks, just not me.
But what does it mean? I'm asking to you, what does it mean to you to be a healer? Not as if you are one, but as if you met somebody who was a quote unquote healer. What would they be doing or possessing that might be different than what you do and offer?
People who see, but I'm stopping because it's stuff I've done before, which is that's why.
That's why you won't answer my question.
Well, people who like lay hands on people is just I'm like, wait.
Like a doctor? Is a doctor a healer? Not all doctors, maybe some doctors.
No, not all doctors. Because I was like, well, people who like lay hands on people and do stuff. But then I was like, oh, well, I do that with Reiki. So like not that.
Yeah. So you're also a Reiki practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Interesting. Well, I think this could be the topic of another podcast episode.
Yeah. Oneika's issues, digging into Oneika's hammer issues.
Oneika's issues with claiming her healing. I can only imagine that you offered sanctuary. I read the first chapter of your book. Thank you for sending that to me. It was beautiful. And I can only imagine that you've offered a lot of sanctuary to so many people that are on Rikers Island, that were on Rikers Island, that had the opportunity to work with you, to learn from you, the gift and all they taught you. It's a two-way street. And I know you've learned so much from being there. I cannot wait for your book to come out. We'll have to bring you back on the podcast when your book comes out. So this is just a preliminary to the actual release. And thank you for joining. Thank you for the work you do in the world. For those that are listening, please be sure to check out all of Oneika's work that is going to be in the show notes and the episode notes, her website, and be on the lookout for her book. You Can Sit With Me. That's the title, correct?
Yes, that's it.
Well, thank you for sitting with me. Thanks for offering your heart, your soul, and all your wisdom with all of our listeners all around the world. It means a lot.
Thanks for having me. It was really a joy.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of Everlutionary. We covered a lot today, and there's so much more that we left unsaid. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that there can be multiple other episodes that we will probably have to do on the prison industrial complex and the institutionalized racism, the disproportionate number of brown and black people who are incarcerated in the United States, but also the world. That is a whole nother episode. Today's episode was a really beautiful, powerful opportunity to learn from Oneika Mays and her personal experience working in one of the largest jails and correctional facilities on the planet. Please stay connected. Please continue your learning. Read through the show notes, and you have a chance to check out some videos that can give you some more historical background on Rikers Island. And then keep coming back for more. I drop a new episode every 2 weeks, and you can always know when that happens by hitting the subscribe, follow, and notification buttons on your podcast app. Remember, you can download them as well. So download the episode and listen to it anywhere, anytime. If you're inspired by this content, please hit the rating button and take a moment and write a 1-sentence review. That goes a long way in the algorithm. It helps to share this brand new podcast with more people. As you'll find as you keep listening, some of my episodes I have guests, other episodes I'm rolling solo. You can always go back and listen to the previous episodes if you haven't already. They're covering some incredible topics like radical love and belonging and survival. So please check out some of the older episodes. And if you want to go deeper with me and do some immersive learning, I offer virtual programming and also in-person learning opportunities. So no matter where you are in the world, there's a way to go deeper. You can click the link in the podcast description that'll take you to my website, and you can register for one of my virtual or in-person retreats. I'm doing a silent meditation retreat in December. So keep learning, keep immersing, keep spreading love, keep being love, keep building peace. Remember, we need you and we need us. Peace. Everlutionary, restoring balance and healing the natural world, is brought to you by me, Hawah Kasat. If you would like to find out more about me and my story, head to hawah.us. That's HAWAH.US. And then make sure to search for me in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening. Stay in touch. Peace.